Welcome back to Small College Conversations. I'm Jim Abbott, the founder of the business of small college athletics, and I'm pleased to be joined today by a good friend of mine, Stevie Baker-Watson, the athletic director at DePauw University. How are you today, Stevie?
I'm great, Jim. How are you?
Well, I'm great. I appreciate you being here. I want to thank Blue Frame Technology for sponsoring Small College Conversations. We just want to have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and learn about your experiences, and maybe share some insights for folks out there in the world who want to lead an athletic department like you do. So with that in mind, why don't we start by just talking a little bit about how you got your start in college athletics and what led you to eventually become an athletic director?
Well, like most folks, well, I shouldn't say this. I did not grow up the stud athlete in high school. I was not a stud athlete in college. I get a little bit pointed when people say, "Oh, you must have been a fantastic athlete to be a great athletic director." But realistically, I got my start in athletic training. Actually, I fell in love with that as a high school student. Went to Ohio University for my undergraduate education, and once I graduated there, went immediately into the workforce and was an athletics trainer in small college. And I was in that role for about 10 years. And it was probably about 6 years into that, I started to realize that some of the things that made me a really good athletic trainer, my ability to communicate with a lot of different people, handle stressful situations, be organized, and have an understanding of what everybody needs to do, those skills and traits made it attractive for me to move into athletic administration. I started to pivot probably right around 2004, 2005, was really rooted to where I was at in the Midwest. And so I didn't want to move. I was married, I had kids, and was able to move from one job into an athletic administration position. And that's when I sort of cut off my ties with athletic training and then moved into that role. I spent 4 or 5 years as an assistant athletics director at a small college outside of Chicago, before I had the opportunity to come to DePauw in February of 2012, where I've been the director of athletics since. So my path, I feel like has adequately prepared me because I have invested in myself. And I've also been in environments where people haven't labeled me and simply said, "You're an athletics trainer, like this is what you need to do." Instead, they embraced me when I wanted to learn more about compliance and student athlete development and budgets and everything else. So here I am, kind of hard to believe, almost 10 years into this chair right now in this role.
Well, it's interesting. I think athletic trainers work incredibly hard. If I was an athletic trainer, I think I would want to have an athletic director who understood that position. But do you think you're more understanding, or do you think you're more demanding because you've done it before?
All of the above. So what I tell our athletics training staff is that I'm the double-edged sword. I know what you're doing and I know what you're doing. So I want to empower people who are around me. I don't I don't need to be the expert in every room, but just like a coach, I have a content area in which I've got more knowledge, more experience to be able to share with others. So that's where it's a good balance, I think. Hopefully if our athletic trainers would say the same thing, a good balance of I can keep some institutional stress at bay for them. I can keep some parental stress at bay for them, type of thing. And they can do what they do best, which is work directly with our student athletes and with their healthcare kind of things. But I will say, it's if they call and they say, this has happened and what else do you need to know? I've always got follow-up questions, because I want to be prepared to support them. And I think that's the difference having me in this role of, I understand what it means when, we're having this type of surgery versus that type of surgery. And what I might need to anticipate, frankly, if I get a question from across campus from my boss, for instance, or if I have a parent call type of thing. I mean, we all know how insurance works, but I really understand how it works in this space. So being able to take calls like that and handle them directly with our parents, I think that that's helpful to our folks.
Well, I do too. In fact, I wish I had known that when I was still an athletic director. I would have just sent people to you so that you could explain how insurance works.
Absolutely.
Well, okay, so 9 years in now as athletic director, what are some of the accomplishments that you're most proud of during that time, and how has the position changed?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure where it's hard to think back to what I was doing 10 years ago, especially with the last couple of years responding to COVID in our space. But I mean, I would say from that lens, big picture, uh, I think that student athletes want to have an excellent experience, but I'm not sure they're so clear to know exactly what that excellent experience means anymore. I think there was a time when they probably thought it meant like I'm playing, we're winning. And I'm not sure that's the case anymore because we have very successful teams. We all do. We all have very successful teams. Students have a whole lot of accolades, but they may not actually be happy with what they're doing. And that's very different. So the student athlete, I think, has changed greatly over this 10-year period of time. We're in a different space where we've got a lot more eyes on us as an industry. And unfortunately, folks are latching onto the things that aren't going so well, as opposed to the great things that are happening, that athletics is providing a vehicle for students to be able to attend a college and to graduate from a college, and that they have additional access and support when they're on a college campus. I mean, I'm at a Division III space, so we do our best to treat every student on our campus similarly. But we're very hands-on with all of our students. So we're able to get to know the 25, the 35 kids on that roster and know if they're doing well in their classes and actually know their professors by sight and by name and get them into that space. So those are some things that have sort of changed. I mean, things that have remained the same, like, I don't even know anymore. Like, it costs more money to do the same thing we did 10 years ago. Some of the reasons I understand, some of the reasons I don't understand, type of thing. But, you know, when I look at what we've been able to accomplish here over 10 years, you know, we've done some things that I think are really easy outwardly for people to see. I got to DePauw in 2012, and we immediately started in the first phase of athletics and recreation master plan. And we put close to about $30 million into our athletic facilities with turfing our fields and bringing a new fitness center on campus. And so people could, right, they could really see those things happening in that spaces. They could go to our website and see that our teams, for instance, are not just busing everywhere and staying locally. We've got teams that are flying to all parts of the country to be able to play. And if you dig into our rosters, you see that we're recruiting kids from all over the country. And that, you know, right as the pandemic was sort of starting, I would say, you would have seen an increased focus for us to be able to travel international with our student athletes. International travel and travel off campus is very big for the DePauw experience. And we wanted to be able to bring that into the athletics realm. And so, you know, we're waiting to safely be able to travel internationally again first. I think the stuff that folks wouldn't see necessarily is how we have developed a culture of care in our department. And that's not to say that we didn't have that before, right? Like, we weren't cold people, we kept at a distance. But we really like working with each other. Like, our staff really likes working. And there are times when we're all together, and there's times when there's smaller cliques that are working together. But I also think too that our students know that we care about them, and that the open door policy really, you know, really means something. And that we understand that as 18 to 22-year-olds, in all different spaces as it relates to their growth and maturation, and that we're here to help them learn how to make a better decision the next time go around. There's discipline, don't get me wrong, but we're not here to be punitive in this space. We're here to provide growth opportunities for them. I think what people wouldn't necessarily see is the amount of collaboration that we do across campus too. So we're part of the Student Affairs Division at DePauw, which means we're going to articulate with folks in housing in the Dean of Students office. But we're having better relationships with fraternity and sorority life, for instance. And that's not necessarily something that we would have had when I first got here. But we also have a high level of engagement, as always, with admission and growing with alumni and development. Not so much from the, hey, you're using us as a platform to be able to raise money, but we are a platform and an entryway for them to be able to find that passion to re-engage our alumni back with the institution. So, you know, we do a fair amount of hiring here. There's a lot of change that's going on, and people making decisions, really good reasons to maybe not stay with us. And we actually just hired a new coach. Them coming to campus, they were sort of surprised about how well we work together, even though they had only been on campus for about 24 hours. Of this is markedly different from where I've been in the past, where I actually do feel like I can pop down the hallway and say hi to somebody, or I can ask somebody for a favor. He wouldn't have been able to do that at his previous space.
Hmm.
So,
well, your passion for what you're doing and your answer to that question is just a reminder of the advantages of working at a small college. We have to be versatile, and we're going to be spread in lots of different areas, but we truly can kind of enjoy the growth of the student, and our accomplishments aren't just whether we won or lost. I can speak to the breadth of your recruiting because one of your student athletes I walk by his house often. I think I sent you over the holidays a picture. Actually, it was back to school because they had a sign in their yard, DePauw bound or something. And I just thought, man, isn't it terrific that DePauw has visibility in Oklahoma City?
well, and for that student athlete in particular, right? That's a student athlete that I've gotten to, I already knew being on a roster, but I've gotten to know better because as we've hired a new coach, they've just recently gotten a new coach.
Yeah.
Our student athletes were very involved in that process, right? So, you ask like what's changed, the student athlete engagement that we're asking for them, because we want to show them that not only we care about who you are in this moment in time, but we also want to help teach you about what it means to bring somebody new in and what it's like to be in an interview process and how to ask all that questions. So go walk down the street. Hopefully he's excited about who we just hired in that space. I think he is, but we'll wait and see.
All right. I'll give you some informal feedback from my conversations. Well, you talked about adding some new coaches. Tell me a little bit about how you help set expectations for coaches and maybe define success for a program.
Well, there's about 10 different things that when I start working with coaches, I say, these are the kind of things that I need you to have on your radar, that, they're not weighted equally, but I'm not here to say to you, like, this is way up here and all these other things are down here. But for coaches to be successful, they have to be able to recruit, retain, and mentor student athletes at DePauw. And it comes with them selecting the student who's going to value the DePauw experience. That's what I want for them too, in terms of if you want to be in an environment where a student only focuses on athletics, this is not the place for you. Because at DePauw, they're going to be part of the radio station. They're going to be part of Greek life. They're going to be in a student organization. They're going to travel internationally. And if you can't handle a student who has a variety of interests, that their level of passion sort of ebbs and flows, we're not the place for you. You need to be a place where collaboration is always near the top of your list. How you collaborate with people in the department, how you collaborate people across campus, how you collaborate in the community with them. Fiscal responsibility is super important for our coaches too. And we do a zero-based budgeting model, which doesn't mean that you can't get more or you're always going to get less, but we want to spend our dollars smart. And we want to make sure that our student athletes have a similar experience depending on what sport that they're in. I want people, like I mentioned earlier, I want to empower them. They're the X's and O's expert. They're going to tell me what's going on there. My job is to help make sure all that institutional stress kind of goes by the wayside. So when I have a new coach come on, one of the things that we do is that for that first year that they're with us, I meet with them once a week, every week. I feel like sometimes we either don't do onboarding in athletics and we do it only in the general institution, or we throw so much at somebody that there is no way that they're going to be able to recall all that information. So by meeting with them once a week, one is we get to develop a relationship and a way to communicate. We also begin to practice sort of what's the really important stuff that maybe I can't wait until my scheduled meeting to talk to the other one about, versus what can I just put on a list and then pull out the next time that I'm there. But it also gives them small chunks to say, typically what I do the first month is every week I give them the names of 3 different people across campus to say, these are 3 people that you need to go talk to because you're going to be working closely with them. And some of them, it's very obvious, like somebody out of admissions, for instance, right? Like that's what's going to do. But sometimes I'll say, why don't you go talk to the director of the Women's Center? They're like, why would I want When am I going to do that? Well, that person supports our students on campus. And so I want you to understand the resources that are available to our students so that way you can refer them out. So we work through that. The other thing too is we have performance evaluations, and I know everybody's, some people say they have them and some people don't. Our performance evaluation system is set up to meet what we need to do to be successful in DePauw athletics. So sometimes you find there's those broad questions like, how do you help the university mission and vision, right? Or how do you do this? And it's really hard to connect all these dots along the way. So we have a custom tool in our department that literally goes through these 10 items, gets them to think about what have they done, what have they not done. I want them to think about, for instance, how have they provided leadership opportunities for people on their staff as head coaches. I want them to think about how they've engaged with other people on campus. And it's a conversation for us at that moment in time. I have regular meetings with our coaches. And for those that get a chance to work with me, I do a lot with a smile on my face. I try to, at least. But I'm a direct communicator with folks too. If something's not going well, I'm going to ask you to come in and let's have a conversation about it. I'm not going to tell you it's going wrong. It's going to be, this is my observation and how can I help you in that space? So bringing new coaches on, I mean, it is a lot of hand-holding to some degree, but it's because I want them to have a successful career at DePauw, whether they spend 2 years with us or they spend 20 years with us.
Well, I love that. I think consistent communication is important. I agree that we can't have a 1-hour meeting and then I turn you loose and you're just going to be great. I mean, because I told you somewhere in that 60 minutes what you should expect here. I didn't hear you mention competitive success. So I'm assuming that's part of your 10, or is it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it is really hard because in a world of sports, we can't disconnect from the terms winning and losing, right? People open up the paper and there's a score and automatically someone has been assigned the winner and someone has been assigned the loser. But there are so many other things that go into having a successful program that, at least at DePauw, we'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we are simply saying, if you haven't won X number of games, you need to be out of here. However, I will say, when you're losing, people tend to be more upset. And when you're winning, people tend to be happier, type of thing. So, if we're seeing program progress, that's a good thing. After every season, we do an end of season survey with our student athletes. It's anonymous. And I will tell you that bugs the crap out of our coaches because they want the kids to put their names on it. And I've said, I understand your perspective, but there's a power dynamic here, right? The other part I want you to take from this is that I don't just look at what's on these pieces of paper and judge your value based upon what they've told me, right? It helps me understand their perspective. It helps me understand the environment. It might actually give me a springboard to ask some additional questions. But yeah, I want you to be competitive. I want you to be win. I mean, DePauw is like a lot of other places. People don't come here to be mediocre. They come here to be exceptional. And it can be really hard if they're exceptional in the classroom and they're 0 for out on the field. So does it come into play? Sure. But I try not to put that pressure on them from the beginning. It's really more about the student experience guiding, I would say, that part of it.
I think that's great. As I reflect on my experiences, I think I had to fire more coaches that were very successful because that was the only thing that really became important. And we really exist to help provide an experience and help build young men and women. And competing is part of that for sure, but it's not the only part of it. So I really enjoyed hearing kind of how you define that, because I think it's so important. We have a job description that says you must do this, you must recruit, you must schedule, you must fundraise. But I think it's just critical to really sort of define, here's what success will look like for you. So thank you for sharing that. I want to switch gears a little bit because you are super active on the national level. You've been involved with NACTA and the NCAA committees. And so talk a little bit about how you got involved nationally, and what are some of the benefits to your being involved?
Well, if I go back to how I got to where I'm at, I needed a space to be able to transition from athletic training into athletic administration. And when that happened, when that first started happening almost 20 years ago, people really just looked at your title and they made assumptions. They went, this is the way my athletic trainer is, so this is the way she must be if that's what her title is. And so I began putting myself in different places in order to build my content knowledge in other areas. So going back in the day when it used to be called the Gender Equity and Issues Forum was something I love to do. Going to the compliance workshops that the NCAA would have, going to women leaders, at that time it was called NACWA, going into these different places to learn different things from people. But there also became a time where I said, I need to establish myself, and this is going to sound awful, not as just the pregnant mom who's toting her kid and her family all over and demonstrating work-life balance like in the moment, because that was kind of that was the picture, the box I got put in when I was doing that and my children were younger. I was very fortunate and privileged that I could travel with my kids and my parents could come with to help. But I got pigeonholed a bit. And that's when I started, as I moved into that full-time administrative role, began becoming involved with NCAA committees and just, loving the room. So when I think committee service, one, is really important for me to be able to sustain our industry, to be able to give back so it can sustain itself for another 50, 100, 150 years, whatever it needs to be. Because I don't think that we're going to continue to move forward by having a singular voice or a small group of people who are making the decisions for everybody. It is the best about trying to stay up to date with professional development. In this business, we read a lot. We've got listservs after listservs that are dumped at us every single day, and we're catching articles and we're able to read things, that are coming from a small town in Maine, even though I'm in small town Indiana, because someone has picked it up and thought it was important and everything else. But being engaged in national committees gives you this inside look at really what is going on in our industry and what's important to these different groups that they're serving. And then finally, I think it's like real life leadership lab. Being able to watch people work a room, be able to watch people gain consensus, argue their points. I have opinions, don't get me wrong. But that doesn't mean every single meeting I go into that I'm going to speak in every single one. I'm going to choose what meetings I need to be more impactful on and perhaps save my voice for those moments versus if I don't break the ice and get these people talking by answering this question, like we're going to be here a long time. So that's why it's been so valuable for me. And I've been so fortunate that I've been able to serve NADIA, which is the Division III Athletic Administrators. I've been able to serve our membership through Management Council and got a short window of time on the Board of Governors in that space. I'm currently serving NACDA and Minority Opportunity Athletic Association. So I try not to do too much at one time. Like I really try to stay like I'm doing one thing at a time because I want to be able to put my all into it. But it's just been fascinating and invigorating. And I think my career would be pretty blah if frankly I didn't have an opportunity to be in those rooms and meet all of these phenomenal people, yourself included, through all this different kind of work that I've been able to do.
I really agree. I took a similar path to you, and I found it to be all of the things you've described. I would say educating. I felt like often I was involved in a conversation that would eventually impact my campus. So to be there at the genesis of an idea was very interesting. To have that opportunity to network was terrific, and really, it's great visibility for your campus. It's good visibility for you. And so what would you, for a younger administrator who's 1 or 2 years in and thinks they've just listened to this interview and they think, I want to be involved, where would you advise them to start?
Well, I think that there's a ton of great organizations out there that are always looking to be able to fill in committee rosters. So I think when we look at any of these structures, you've always got this set of subcommittees that are doing some work that are feeding up into some kind of board that you have to be elected into. Don't worry about what your title is. in any of these spaces, right? It's not a popularity contest. I don't do these things so I can frankly put it on a resume. I do it because I want to give back. And so find the organizations that mean something to you. So when I started in, one of the first groups that I was doing work with was the Champs Life Skills Advisory Group. I was very much into that student development space. And so I wanted to do more in there. And so I sat in that space and helped out at different meetings. And then it moved into, I'm going to be part of that advisory team and that advisory board. And it just naturally happened in that way. I wasn't caught up in being elected into a position or having a titled role. So, there's a lot of great organizations. And this isn't necessarily a plug just for NACDA, but NACDA's got a lot under their umbrella of different groups, whether it's, a governing body, Athletic Director Association, whether it's NAIA or NCAA or junior college. It's got folks who are focused in marketing or facilities or compliance. Go in there and send the email to their liaison or to somebody in their board and say, I'm interested in getting involved. What can I do? Like 10 times out of 10, they're going to send you back a form that says, tell us what subcommittee you want to work in. They never turn people away from subcommittees. But you have to be willing to give the time and you got to be willing to do the work. If you just want to be in that space because you're using it only as a stepping stone to get to something else, or only so you meet a certain person who might help you later on, you're not going to be fulfilled and they're just going to be dragging you along. So find the group that you really love working with, start there. And then you may find like, oh, I want to serve that group now too. Like finish this one out and then move on to the next one.
Yeah, it once you kind of get started, you may reach a point where you got to say, hey, I need to slow it down a little bit. But I would, I think even looking within your conference, sometimes there are opportunities for me. When I sat in meetings of the Athletic Directors Association, I basically went to the president at the time, this was years ago, and said, I think I want to be more involved. I mean, I literally, as you're saying, just sort of reached out and that was all it took. He said, well, great, I'm going to nominate you for this. And,
Careful what you wish for in some of these things.
Well, all of them are wonderful experiences and require, and you got to do the work. You got to bring value to it. It's not just sit there and add it to your resume. So you recently were involved in a big one. You were involved in the NCAA Constitution Committee, and I don't know, Stevie, were there 2 or 3 other Division III representatives, or?
There were a total of 5 of us that served that group.
Okay, so big changes being talked about in the NCAA, and you were asked to come and be a part of this group. Can you share a little bit about how that experience went?
Fascinating. I mean, fascinating and exhausting, right? I think when this first got announced, it was probably mid-July or so that the NCAA was going to have this constitution revision and they were going to establish this committee and what they were going to do, with this idea that you were going to have all of this work done by theoretically December to be able to vote in January. And I think all of us, myself included, went, how is this going to happen? Like this is monumental in itself, but just the amount of work that might be generated from this was huge. So being able to be part of that group was wonderful. I think because I had experience on management council for 4 years, I had time on board of governors. I consider myself, one who stays up to date in terms of what's going on, that I was able to understand the root issues at hand that we had in that conversation. So I didn't need to have this, huge upcycle to try and get into that space. Being able to work across divisions. There's part of me that has a chip on my shoulder that says, just because I'm not at a, autonomy 5 institution doesn't mean that I don't have a good head on my shoulders and I can't possibly understand what's going on at your institution or what's going on with your student athletes type of thing. So there was part of me who wanted to be a part of those conversations. And then some of it is just, again, that leadership lab and watching, seeing who else was in that group and being able to watch them. That short time that I was on board of governors, was the time in which we had voted in as an association that there were going to be independent members joining us. And then I got to see it in action. They were phenomenal. And so to be able to be in that kind of environment again was just, it was great. I mean, it was exhausting from the sense of, we generally were having probably anywhere between 5 to 8 hours of structured meetings per week, whether that was with our Constitution committee or just those of the 5 of us that were from Division 3. But it required a lot of outreach and a lot of listening to people. So then there are certain weeks where you've got another 5 or 6 hours of listening sessions with, people throwing stuff at you. And then you're going into other informal meetings and having that. So there's just a lot of listening, a lot of time that needed to go into that. So I think if you talk to folks in Division 3, some of them are okay where we've ended up. I think others are not. And what I have said to everybody is that now it's time for you to evaluate the data and make the decision that's in your best interest and that you think is in the best interest of you. I'm not here to swing you one way or another. I'm here to make sure that you have accurate information to be able to make a decision.
And those decisions are upcoming, right?
They are. So at the January convention, we'll vote on we'll vote on this this new constitution. I think I want to be very careful to. I believe that this will probably pass, but I say that based upon the people that I'm talking to, not to sort of form an influence. But sitting in that room, it got tense at sometimes, like. And this won't come as a surprise to anybody who's listening or reading this, that Division 3 wanted more money. And by more money, I think what they really wanted to see was the 3.18% distribution, that number change on paper. And that's not what's in the new Constitution. And so that was frustrating to folks. One of the probably most tense conversations we had around that Constitution Committee table was about we had to respect each other's autonomy about how we spend that money. And we also, needed, frankly, it was hard to hear that, we as a division just don't generate the same kind of revenue that for the NCAA that others do. And in a space where we preach equity, it didn't align itself with what the final product was in that space. And that concept in discussion wasn't necessarily, it wasn't impactful to others, right? Like, I think we sit around the table a lot and you try and make sure that you have equity with your students in any number of different places. Understanding that doesn't necessarily mean that things are equal. We found that as we had those discussions, it was really hard to see any equity or any way in which things were equal with other people sitting around that table. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And our business has some things they have to do moving forward. It's time to pivot and change. And frankly, if we want to be a little bit upset about things, we should have fought harder back in 1996 when some original information went into the Constitution about that revenue distribution. And that's not laying blame, that's hindsight being 2020, right? If we wouldn't have made that decision back in 1996, we probably would not be in the same position that we are in 2022, having a discussion about money and what we can do for our students.
Yeah, 25 years later, and who's to say that there won't be, another, you could just about guarantee there will be more conversations like this, and probably it won't take 25 years for it to happen again.
I'm guessing the next 8 to 10, we're going to have a major change in college athletics. I don't know what that is just yet, but hearing some of the sidebar conversations in that room and having a different lens than when you're reading things in the media now, I don't think status quo is not going to be here for much longer.
I think you're right. And I'm not thinking about the big changes in 8 to 10 years, but what do you think, what do you see as one or two of the biggest issues that college athletics faces right now?
One is, I think, respect of the student athlete, and respect is going to mean a whole bunch of different things. We're seeing that on the name, image, and likeness front, for instance, in the NCAA, in terms of them being able to own themselves in the grand scheme of things. but that also lends to just their experience within our programs. I think one of the things that was most surprising to me, and then I got to the spot where I sort of moved out of this denial and into this acceptance phase of our student athletes feel that they need to be protected. And I don't think it's widespread. I don't think all coaches are bad, but I think it's very clear that some folks have lost their way about how they should be treating other people, how they should be teaching student athletes, how they should be modeling for them. And so I think that's going to be a big thing for us moving forward, because then that trickles down into the mental health of our student athletes. And I'm going to say mental well-being or mental wellness, because not all of our student athletes are going to have diagnosed mental health disorders. That's not it. But there's a whole lot of things that they're experiencing and that they're being asked to absorb and handle very differently than what we did growing up. And so not only do we have this very different environment that they have to navigate, we don't necessarily have a direct experience to be able to lean upon to say, well, when this happened to me, right? When I was in this pandemic back when I was 5, like, this is how it handled. I mean, we don't have a moment in time where, like, for the last 2 years, we basically told kids, you got to live in your house. But, you know, my role on campus, it was interesting and it was sad that, you know, we'd get calls from people that would say, you know, my child can't stay at home. Like, this is not the best environment for them. The best environment for them is to be back on a college campus. And that wasn't because they couldn't clothe them or house them or feed them or anything else like that. But the student needed sort of the escape of that college environment sort of thing. So I think we're going to see that. And then the cost of athletics. I think the financial side of all of this is really going to come to a head. So one of the first exercises we did in our Constitution Committee is you went through the existing Constitution and you basically said, you know, what are you getting rid of? What do you keep in? What do you need to maybe shift and morph? And there used to be, well, in the current Constitution, there's a provision that talks about fiscal responsibility, like a principle of fiscal responsibility. And we were on the tail end of having a conversation about how everyone spends their money. And my feedback was, we cannot have this in the new Constitution because I don't know how we demonstrate that we're fiscally responsible in all of this. You know, there's a lot of decisions that are made at my level that are directly about the student athlete experience. And I think that happens across the country. But I also think there's a lot of people who make decisions based upon the fan experience, for instance. Mm-hmm. And that changes how you invest and where you invest your dollars and all of this stuff. I don't know if we can continue with some of these salaries that we're seeing. You know, that this whole transfer portal stuff is such an interesting conversation of, you know, you have coaches who are bouncing at any moment in time, but yet there are people who are really struggling as student athletes. They don't want student athletes to be able to bounce at any time. And if you think about why that is, well, it kind of affects their bottom line. So I think it's finances, and I think that student athlete health and wellness are going to be the two things that we're going to focus the most on, especially in the next couple of years.
I think those are great examples. You and I have both worked at institutions that value retention, for example, and when you imagine losing a student because they can get a better name, image, likeness deal at Wabash, for example.
That example.
I know that sounds crazy, and I don't think it's going to happen necessarily at our level, but you're right. When from the financial standpoint, when we're spending millions of dollars creating club level seats and doing all these things, and then you and I are maybe just concerned about
can I get a bus that I can take every kid on the roster, like
right. And then we'll actually work the entire trip. You know, it actually makes it to the location and back.
Right, exactly.
Well, I want to end with kind of a softball here because you may not know this. I'm a native Hoosier. I was born in Crawfordsville, Indiana.
I didn't know that.
So I want to end this by hearing your best sort of Chamber of Commerce. What advice would you give to somebody who's coming to Greencastle, Indiana for the first time? What are the one or two things that they have to do to get the most out of that experience?
Wow, you're from Crawfordsville. I had no idea. You don't wear red though anymore, right? Like,
no, I wear blue because Oklahoma City University was blue. We still have our family farm in Northwest Indiana, so just north of Lafayette.
Okay, so when you come to Greencastle, I think that you need to take a moment and you need to drive our campus, which is directly connected to downtown. People are overtaken, overwhelmed, completely surprised by the beauty of our campus. And so I think that that's one thing. I think that once you drive our campus and you get the lay of the land, I think you need to park your car, and then I think you need to walk that same space. Within this downtown area, so you've got DePauw, which is, I think it's like, we're like 500 acres directly connected to the downtown. You get an opportunity to walk into small town America, and you find that we have great restaurants. We've got a couple of stores. We've got some things that are homegrown and local, and that's the way Greencastle likes to be. You're not going to come here and find a Chili's. You're not going to come here and find an Applebee's. I do have a Starbucks. I have a Buffalo Wild Wings, right? You don't have to do those things, but come and experience the folks who have invested in the community with the local artisan craft stores, or who have, built the successful restaurant businesses for the last 25 years. I came from the Chicago suburbs, and I grew up there, went to college in Ohio, and then I came back, and you are used to, 25 miles will take you an hour and a half to kind of drive here. Around here, it's a mile a minute. But I love the pace of Greencastle. I love the friendliness of people who are here. I came here twice, once in 2005 for an NCAA championship, once in 2010 for another one. And both times I left there thinking like, I think I could do that. And so, you come and you're pleasantly surprised by what you can find to sort of do. DePauw actually has a 520 acre nature park that's directly connected to campus. So if you love the outdoors, you can come here. But this has been my home now for the last 10 years. And it would be hard for me to move back to a larger city. It'd be hard for me to move back to a community that people don't know you, and people don't look out for you, and people don't stop by and say hello when you're eating at the local restaurant kind of thing. So if you ever get back to Crawfordsville, or you get back up to that farm, please come on down. I'm happy to show you around.
I'll tell you what, I'm coming. You made it sound much more romantic than the Chamber of Commerce probably would have. I think
story, right? Like I can give you the story of how everybody built up their business on the square and how it's local and it's supporting the community. I mean, Moore's Bar, I'll give the little plug for Moore's Bar. So Moore's Bar is owned by Pete Meyer. Pete is one of four boys who have all been involved in college athletics. His dad, Ed, and his mom, Ann, were staples in the Greencastle community. Ed was a longtime football and baseball coach for us. Pete Meyer was the longtime athletic director at Florida Southern University in Division II. He retired and he came back home and he bought Moore's Bar because that's where his mom and dad ate dinner every Friday night. They've got the best food. They've got great ambiance. So yeah, everybody's got a story. We love to tell it here.
Well, I sort of feel like my life won't be complete if I don't make it to Greencastle and check out the bar. So I've got it on my bucket list. Stevie, I sort of feel like we could talk forever, but I think we need to sort of bring this to a close. So I want to say thank you to you just for what you're doing for our profession, your natural sort of willingness to give back and to help others. I admire what you're doing, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I also have to thank Blue Frame Technology for sponsoring this. But just thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Jim. This has been fun.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on another Small College Conversation. Join us again in the future for our next one. Thanks so much.